a lonely billionaire, spent Christmas by himself until his new maid invited him to dinner. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic and emotional stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. And one more thing, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. On Christmas Eve, the Blackwood estate looked exactly the way magazines loved to photograph it. Perfectly trimmed hedges dusted with snow, tall windows glowing with warm light. A house so large it could easily hold a party, a family, or a lifetime of noise. But inside there was only one man. Ethan Blackwood, a billionaire tycoon known across the country for building companies from nothing, sat alone at the head of a long dining table meant for 12 people. Only one plate was set, one glass of water, one neatly folded napkin, one chair pulled out facing 11 empty ones. The food had already gone cold. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then slowly pushed the plate away. At 50 years old, he had learned many things about success: how to negotiate without blinking, how to read numbers faster than people, how to survive betrayal, pressure, and endless expectations. But no one had ever taught him how to survive Christmas. The television across the room played softly, filled with familiar holiday sounds: children laughing, a couple clinking glasses, someone shouting "Merry Christmas." Ethan reached for the remote and turned it off. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound had ever been. He leaned back in his chair and looked around the room. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the expensive art he barely remembered buying. All of it was impressive. None of it was comforting. He stood up and walked toward the tall window overlooking the frozen grounds. Outside, snow continued to fall, quiet and steady, covering the world in white. Another Christmas, he thought. Another year alone. This was not how he imagined life would look when he was younger, back when success felt like a promise instead of a shield. There had been a time when Christmas meant something else: a smaller home, a louder table, a woman laughing in the kitchen. Ethan closed his eyes, pushing the memory away before it could settle. Not tonight. Footsteps echoed softly behind him, careful and unassuming. Ethan did not turn right away. He already knew who it was. She had been working in the house for less than 3 weeks, hired through a temporary agency to help while the regular staff took time off for the holidays. Her name was Maya. She stopped a respectful distance behind him. "Sir," she said gently, "I wanted to check if there is anything else you need this evening." Her voice was calm, not forced, not overly cheerful, just honest. Ethan kept his gaze on the snow outside. "No," he replied. "You can head home." There was a brief pause. "I do not really have anywhere to go," she said quietly. "But I will not disturb you. I can stay downstairs." Ethan turned to look at her. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, wearing her uniform neatly. No makeup, no jewelry, just tired eyes and a composed expression, as if she had learned long ago how to take up as little space as possible. For a moment Ethan felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. "You do not have to stay," he said. "It is Christmas." Maya gave a small, polite smile. "I know." Her eyes drifted just briefly to the dining table behind him. The single plate, the untouched meal. She did not comment. "I will finish cleaning the kitchen," she said softly. She turned to leave. "Maya," Ethan said before he realized he was speaking. She stopped and looked back. "Yes, sir, thank you," he said after a pause, "for being here." Her smile this time was warmer, quieter. "Of course." As she walked away, Ethan remained standing by the window. The house was still quiet, still large, still empty. But for the first time that night it did not feel quite as cold. Downstairs in a small kitchen that was rarely used, Maya placed a pot on the stove. It was nothing special. Just soup, the kind of meal meant to warm someone up, not impress them. As the steam slowly rose, Maya hummed under her breath, unaware that upstairs a man who had conquered boardrooms and markets was standing alone, listening to the faint sound of life returning to his house. And without either of them knowing it yet, that simple sound was the first step toward healing. The night grew quieter after that. Snow continued to fall outside the Blackwood estate, layering the ground inch by inch as if trying to soften everything it touched. Inside the house remained warm, but the warmth had never really reached Ethan Blackwood himself. Not for years. After Maya disappeared into the staff kitchen, Ethan returned to the dining room, but he did not sit back down. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the long table again. 12 chairs, 12 places where people were supposed to belong. He remembered when that table was new. Back then he had imagined holidays filled with voices, arguments about politics, laughter spilling, wine glasses, someone teasing him for working too much even on Christmas. Instead, year after year, the table had become a symbol of everything he had lost along the way. Ethan loosened his tie and finally left the dining room, walking slowly through the hallways of the mansion. Each step echoed. Every room felt larger than it needed to be, emptier than it should have been. This house was built for success, not comfort. That was always his excuse. Ethan had built his fortune from the ground up. He grew up watching his father struggle to keep a small business alive, only to lose it during a recession that no one ever fully recovered from. From that moment on, Ethan promised himself one thing: he would never be powerless again. He worked longer hours than anyone around him. He missed birthdays. He missed holidays. He missed moments he assumed he could always buy back later. But life did not wait. His marriage did not survive the endless nights, the canceled trips, the constant absence disguised as ambition. When his wife finally left, she did not take much with her, just a suitcase and the quiet truth he refused to hear at the time: "You chose everything else." Ethan told himself he was fine after that. He told himself loneliness was the price of greatness, a reasonable trade. But Christmas had a way of exposing lies people told themselves. He stopped near the staircase, listening. From downstairs he could hear faint sounds drifting upward. The soft clink of a spoon against a pot. The low hum of a tune he did not recognize but somehow felt familiar. It was not loud. It was not intrusive. It was human. Ethan found himself standing still, listening longer than he intended. Down in the kitchen, Maya stirred the soup slowly, letting the heat rise gently. She had learned long ago that rushing things never made them better. Not meals, not people, not pain. She lived in a small apartment across town, one she shared with her mother when her mother was healthy enough to stay there. Lately, hospital rooms had become more familiar than living rooms. Working through the holidays was not a sacrifice for Maya. It was a necessity. Medical bills did not care about Christmas. Still, she had not expected to feel this strange sense of heaviness in the house, a weight that did not come from sadness alone but from years of silence layered on top of each other. She had seen loneliness before. It did not always look dramatic. Sometimes it wore expensive suits and lived behind gates. The soup was almost ready when Ethan finally descended the stairs. He stopped at the edge of the kitchen, unsure why he was there. Maya noticed him immediately. "Oh," she said softly, "I did not hear you come down." "I could smell it," Ethan replied. "It smells familiar." She smiled. "It is nothing special, just something warm." He nodded, watching her ladle the soup into a simple bowl. No gold trim, no elaborate presentation, just steam rising into the air. Ethan realized something then. No one had cooked for him like this in a very long time, not because he could not afford chefs, but because no one had done it without being asked or paid or instructed. Maya set the bowl on the small kitchen table, hesitated for a second, then looked up at him. "If you would like," she said carefully, "you are welcome to sit, just for a moment." Ethan looked at the table. It was small, barely enough room for 2 people, nothing like the grand dining room upstairs. And yet, for the first time that night, the idea of sitting down did not feel exhausting. He pulled out a chair. "Just for a moment," he said. As he sat, Ethan did not realize it yet, but something inside him had already begun to shift. Not because of the soup, but because for the first time in years he was no longer eating alone. The kitchen was quiet as they sat across from each other. Not the heavy silence Ethan was used to, but a softer one, the kind that did not demand anything. Steam rose slowly from the bowl in front of him. Ethan wrapped his hands around it without thinking, letting the warmth sink into his palms. The heat surprised him, not because it was hot, but because it felt grounding, real. He took a cautious sip. It tasted simple, familiar, like something from a life he had once lived before meetings and deadlines replaced meals and conversations. "This is good," he said quietly. Maya nodded, sitting across from him with her own bowl. "My mother used to say that soup is not meant to impress. It is meant to help you breathe again." Ethan looked at her slightly, caught off guard. "That is an interesting way to put it." She gave a small shrug. She had many sayings. They ate in silence for a few moments. Ethan realized how long it had been since he had shared a meal with someone without an agenda. No contracts, no negotiations, no expectations, just food and another person. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, but it no longer felt accusatory. It was modest, functional, clearly not meant for hosting anyone important, and yet sitting there felt more natural than the grand dining room upstairs ever had. "I usually eat alone," he admitted the words, leaving his mouth before he had time to reconsider. Maya did not look surprised. "Many people do," she replied gently, "especially those who carry a lot." Ethan studied her face. There was no pity there, no judgment, just quiet understanding. "You seem very comfortable here," he said. "Despite everything." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Comfort is not about the place. It is about knowing what you can survive." The words lingered between them. Ethan realized then that Maya was not simply kind. She was resilient, the kind of person who had learned to keep moving forward even when life did not make it easy. After a moment he asked, "Do you miss being somewhere else tonight?" She considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she said, "but tonight I think this is where I am supposed to be." Ethan nodded slowly. He did not know why, but hearing that made something in his chest ease. When they finished eating, Maya stood and took the bowls to the sink. Ethan instinctively reached for his wallet, then stopped himself. The gesture felt wrong here. Instead, he remained seated, watching as she rinsed the dishes with practiced ease. "I should not keep you," he said. "It is late." She turned to face him. "You are not keeping me," she replied. "I am choosing to stay." That distinction mattered more than Ethan expected. As Maya finished cleaning up, Ethan stood and looked at the small table again. 2 empty bowls, 2 chairs. Proof that the night had not been imagined. "Thank you," he said again, more firmly this time, "for dinner. For not letting me disappear tonight." Maya met his eyes, her expression steady. "You were already here," she said. "You just needed someone to sit with you." Ethan did not respond right away. As he walked back upstairs later that night, the house felt different. Not smaller, not louder, but less empty. And for the first time in years, Ethan Blackwood went to sleep on Christmas Eve with the quiet understanding that healing did not arrive all at once. Sometimes it began with something as simple as a shared meal and the choice to stay. Morning arrived quietly at the Blackwood estate. The snow from the night before rested untouched along the driveway, smooth and unbroken. Inside the house, light filtered through tall windows, softer than usual, as if the mansion itself was waking up more gently than it had in years. Ethan Blackwood stood at the top of the staircase, listening. For the first time on Christmas morning, the house was not completely silent. From downstairs came the faint sound of movement. Cabinets opening, water running, a low hum barely audible drifting through the air. He did not rush. Ethan had spent most of his life moving quickly, always ahead of the next problem, the next deal, the next demand. But that morning something held him in place, a quiet awareness that if he moved too fast, the moment might disappear. When he finally walked down the stairs, the smell of coffee met him halfway. Maya was already in the kitchen, standing by the counter. She had changed out of her uniform into a simple sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked less like an employee now and more like someone who belonged in the space. "Oh," she said, when she noticed him. "Good morning. I hope I did not wake you." "No," Ethan replied. "I was already awake." That was true. He had woken before dawn, not with the usual weight in his chest, but with a strange sense of calm he did not quite recognize. Maya gestured toward the counter. "I made coffee. I was not sure how you take it." "Black," he said automatically, then paused. "Thank you." She poured him a cup and slid it across the counter. Their fingers did not touch, but the gesture itself felt personal in a way that unsettled him. They stood there for a moment, sipping quietly. "I usually do not like Christmas mornings," Ethan said suddenly. Maya looked at him, attentive but not intrusive. "Why is that?" "Because they remind me of expectations I did not meet," he answered. "Of people I disappointed. Of promises I thought I could delay." She considered his words carefully. "Sometimes," she said, "we think healing means fixing the past. But most of the time it just means not punishing ourselves forever." Ethan stared into his cup. No one spoke to him like that. Not advisors. Not executives. Not the people who wanted something from him. "You seem very certain," he said. "I am not," Maya replied. "I have just had a lot of practice surviving disappointment." The honesty in her voice stayed with him. Later that morning, Ethan surprised himself by doing something he had not done in years. He stayed. He did not retreat to his office. He did not open his laptop. He did not check messages. Instead, he found himself sitting at the small kitchen table again, watching as Maya prepared a simple breakfast. "You do not have to do all this," he said. "I know," she replied. "I want to." That choice once again mattered. As they ate, the conversation remained quiet but easy. Small things, where she grew up, why she preferred mornings to nights, how he used to like building things with his hands before business consumed everything. The hours passed without either of them noticing. By midday, sunlight filled the kitchen. The mansion felt less like a monument to success and more like a place where something could begin. Ethan leaned back in his chair, realizing something that unsettled and comforted him at the same time. This was not a holiday miracle. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just presence, and for a man who had spent years avoiding it, presence felt like the most powerful form of healing he had ever known. He looked at Maya and said quietly, "I am glad you stayed." She smiled. "So am I." Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple decision would begin to change more than just one Christmas. The afternoon settled into the house slowly, almost cautiously. Sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor, warming the space where Ethan and Maya had spent most of the morning. Outside, the snow began to melt just enough to reveal patches of dark stone beneath, as if the world itself was beginning to breathe again. Ethan stood near the window, watching it happen. For years, afternoons like this were filled with calls, reports, and urgent decisions. But today there was none of that. No schedule demanding his attention. No assistant reminding him where to be next. Only time. Maya was at the counter slicing bread with steady hands. The movement was simple, unremarkable, yet Ethan found himself watching anyway. "You do not seem restless," she said without looking up. "I usually am," he admitted. "This is new." She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Healing often feels unfamiliar. Silence can be uncomfortable when we are used to noise. Ethan considered that. "I always thought staying busy was strength," he said. "That slowing down meant losing control." Maya finally looked at him. "Sometimes slowing down is the only way to notice what hurts." The words landed gently but firmly. Ethan felt something shift again, not dramatically, just enough to matter. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you always understand people this well?" She smiled faintly. "No. I just listen." They sat at the small table once more, this time with tea instead of soup or coffee. The rhythm between them felt natural now, no longer fragile. After a moment, Ethan spoke again. "I did not invite anyone here this year," he said. "Not family, not friends. I told myself it was easier that way." Maya listened quietly. "But the truth," he continued, "is that I did not want to face the disappointment. or my own. He expected sympathy, maybe reassurance. Instead, Maya said, "It is not weakness to want to be seen at your best, but it takes courage to be seen as you are." Ethan let out a slow breath. No one had ever framed it that way for him. The clock chimed softly in the distance, marking the passing hours. Christmas Day was slipping by, but for once Ethan did not feel the urge to chase it. "I used to believe money could fix anything," he said. "Grief, loneliness, regret." Maya folded her hands around her cup. And now I am realizing that it can only build walls," he answered. "It cannot sit with you when the house feels empty." She met his gaze. There was something steady there, something grounding. "That is why people matter," she said. "Even one person can change the temperature of a room." Ethan glanced around the kitchen again. The small table, the chairs pulled close, the quiet warmth lingering in the air. For the first time he understood what she meant. Later, as the afternoon light began to fade, Ethan found himself doing something unexpected. He laughed. It was soft, brief, almost surprised, but it was real. Maya looked up, startled, then smiled in response. "I forgot what that sounded like," Ethan said. "Then maybe it is time to remember," she replied. As evening approached, Ethan realized that the emptiness he had feared all day had not returned. It had been replaced by something quieter, something steadier, connection. And though neither of them said it out loud, both understood that what was happening was not accidental. Healing rarely announced itself. Sometimes it simply showed up, sat down at the table, and waited patiently to be noticed. Evening arrived gently, without ceremony. The sky outside the kitchen window shifted from pale winter blue to a deeper shade of gray, and the lights inside the house flickered on one by one. The mansion no longer felt like an empty shell, but it was still quiet enough that every sound mattered. Maya stood at the sink, washing the last cup from the afternoon tea. Ethan watched her from the small table, noticing the slight stiffness in her shoulders, the way she moved carefully as if conserving energy. "You look tired," he said, not as an observation but as concern. She paused, then nodded. "I am. Today has been long." He hesitated, then asked, "You could have gone home earlier." "Why did you stay?" Maya dried her hands slowly, buying herself time. "For the same reason most people do not like to be alone on holidays," she said. "And because I did not want you to be alone either." Ethan absorbed that quietly. After a moment he said, "You keep taking care of everyone else. Who takes care of you?" The question caught her off guard. Maya turned toward him, surprised by the directness. For a brief second she looked like she might brush it off. Instead she exhaled and sat down across from him. "My mother," she began, her voice steady but softer now. "She has been sick for a while. Heart complications. Some days are better than others." Ethan leaned forward slightly, listening. "I work as much as I can," she continued. "Not because I love the job, but because hospitals do not wait. Bills do not wait. And being strong feels easier than asking for help." There was no self-pity in her words, just truth. Ethan nodded slowly. "That sounds familiar." She met his eyes. "You hide differently, but it is the same thing." The silence that followed was heavier than before, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind that allowed honesty to exist without being rushed. "I used to think," Maya said after a moment, "that if I just kept moving, nothing could catch up to me. But illness does not care how fast you run." Ethan swallowed. He thought of his own years of avoidance, his belief that distance could protect him from pain. "I am sorry," he said quietly, "that you are carrying all of that." She smiled faintly. "I am not asking you to fix it. I just wanted you to know." That mattered more to him than she realized. For the first time, Ethan saw Maya not just as the calm presence who had changed his Christmas, but as someone standing at the edge of exhaustion, choosing kindness anyway. "You should not have to carry it alone," he said. She shook her head gently. "Most people do. They just do not talk about it." Ethan looked around the kitchen again. The small table, the two chairs, the quiet warmth that still lingered. "This house," he said slowly, "has been empty for a long time, Not because no one lived here, but because no one shared anything real. Maya listened, her expression attentive. I do not know how to fix what is broken, he continued, in myself or anywhere else. But I do know this. What you did today mattered. She lowered her gaze briefly, then looked back up. So did what you allowed. That truth settled between them. Outside, the snow began to fall again, lighter this time. Inside, the house felt steadier, as if it were finally learning how to hold more than silence. As the evening deepened, neither of them spoke much more. They did not need to. For Ethan, the healing was no longer just about easing his own loneliness. It was about recognizing the quiet strength in someone else, and understanding that connection worked both ways. And for Maya, sitting there, she realized something unexpected. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel invisible. Christmas Day was nearly over, but something far more lasting had begun. Not a solution, not a miracle, just two people finally seen choosing not to look away. The next morning did not arrive with the same gentleness. The Blackwood estate woke to movement it had not felt in days. Cars pulling into the driveway, doors opening and closing, voices echoing through the halls with purpose and expectation. Routine was returning. Ethan stood in his study reviewing documents on his tablet when the sound reached him. The familiar rhythm of staff returning after the holiday break, housekeeping, security. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, moving briskly as she always did. The house was slipping back into its old shape. Downstairs, Maya had already changed back into her uniform. The warmth of the previous day still lingered inside her, but she felt it tightening now, as if preparing for impact. She knew this feeling. Moments like yesterday were never meant to last without consequences. As she carried fresh linens down the hallway, Mrs. Collins stopped her. Maya, she said, her tone polite but firm. A word, please. Maya paused and turned. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Collins glanced around before lowering her voice. I need to remind you of proper boundaries. This is a professional household. Maya nodded slowly. Of course. There were observations, Mrs. Collins continued. You spent a great deal of time with Mr. Blackwood yesterday. Maya felt her stomach tighten. He asked me to stay, she said carefully. I did not neglect my duties. That is not the point, Mrs. Collins replied. Staff should not blur lines. It makes people uncomfortable. Maya lowered her eyes. I understand. Mrs. Collins hesitated, then added, just be mindful. People notice things. As she walked away, Maya remained still for a moment, letting the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. This was the part she knew well. Kindness was allowed only until it made others uneasy. Upstairs, Ethan sensed the shift without seeing it. The house felt different again. Sharper, more controlled. He left his study and headed downstairs, where he found Maya quietly arranging flowers in a vase by the window. Her movements were precise now, guarded. Good morning, he said. She looked up, surprised. Good morning, sir. There it was. The distance. Something in his chest tightened. Is everything all right, he asked. Maya hesitated. Yes, just getting back to work. Ethan studied her face. He recognized that expression, the careful mask people wore when they felt they had overstepped. You did not do anything wrong, he said. She offered a polite smile. I know. But he could tell she did not fully believe it. Later that afternoon, Ethan was pulled into a meeting with his estate manager and legal advisor. Practical matters, staffing concerns, security protocols. At the end, the manager cleared his throat. There is one more thing, he said. Regarding temporary staff. Ethan looked up. What about them? There have been concerns raised, the man replied. About familiarity, appearances. It might be best to rotate certain personnel. Ethan understood immediately. They were talking about Maya. She crossed no line, Ethan said calmly. Of course not, the advisor replied quickly. But perception matters. Your reputation matters. Ethan leaned back in his chair. For years he had accepted that logic without question, but something inside him resisted now. "She brought warmth into this house," he said. "Something it has lacked." The room went quiet. With respect, the manager said, "That is not her role." Ethan felt the weight of the decision settle fully. This was the moment healing always demanded. Not comfort, choice. That evening Ethan found Maya in the kitchen again, packing away supplies. "They spoke to you," he said. She nodded without looking at him. "They did. I am sorry," he said, "for making things difficult." She finally met his eyes. "You did not. This is just how things work." "Does it have to?" he asked. Maya did not answer right away. "I cannot afford to lose this job," she said quietly. "My mother needs her medication." Ethan heard the unspoken fear beneath her words, and in that moment he realized the healing he had begun was now being tested, not by loneliness, but by whether he was willing to protect what had helped him heal. The house stood silent around them, waiting, and Ethan knew that whatever he chose next would define far more than his reputation. That night Ethan Blackwood did not sleep. The house had returned to its familiar stillness, but now the silence felt different. He sat alone in his study, lights low, the city far beyond the gates, unaware of the decision pressing down on him. For most of his life, choices had been simple: profit or loss, risk or caution, public image or private cost. But this was not a business problem. This was about people. Ethan replayed the words he had heard earlier. Perception matters. Your reputation matters. He had built his empire by listening to those voices, and yet for the first time they felt hollow. Just before midnight he stood, put on his coat, and walked downstairs. The kitchen light was still on. Maya was there, seated at the small table, paperwork spread in front of her. Medical statements, insurance letters, numbers written carefully in the margins as if precision could somehow control uncertainty. She looked up, startled when she saw him. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I was about to leave." "You do not need to," Ethan replied. "Please. Stay." She hesitated, then sat back down. Ethan took a seat across from her, not as an employer but as someone choosing to be present. "They are worried about boundaries," he said plainly. Maya nodded. "I expected that. And you are worried about your job," he continued. She did not deny it. "I cannot lose this position." "Not right now." Ethan folded his hands on the table. "I do not want you to feel like kindness is something you should be punished for," he said. "And I will not allow this house to become a place where warmth is treated as a liability." Maya looked at him, unsure. "What are you saying?" she asked carefully. "I am saying that no one will rotate you out," Ethan replied. "No one will question your place here." She inhaled sharply. "Sir, I do not want special treatment." "This is not special treatment," he said. "This is respect." There was a pause, heavy with meaning. "And your mother," Ethan added. "You mentioned her medication. I looked into it." Maya stiffened. "You did not have to." "I know," he said gently. "But I wanted to." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were details for a private care program, transportation assistance, and coverage that would ease the burden she had been carrying alone. Maya stared at it, her hands trembling. "This is too much," she whispered. "It is enough," Ethan replied. "Enough to let you breathe." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You already did," he answered. "When you chose to stay, the house felt warmer in that moment, not because of the lights or the heat, but because something had been set right." The next morning, Ethan addressed the staff directly. "There will be no changes to our team based on assumptions or appearances," he said calmly. "Kindness is not a violation here," no one argued. Because when he spoke like that, people listened. Later, as sunlight filled the kitchen once more, Maya prepared breakfast as she always did. But something had changed. She moved more freely now, less guarded. Ethan joined her at the small table, coffee in hand. "This house feels different," she said softly. "It is," he replied, "because I finally chose what mattered." And in that choice, Ethan Blackwood completed a part of his healing he had avoided for years. not by holding on to power, but by using it to protect what was human. The months that followed passed quietly without headlines or announcements. Winter gave way to early spring, and with it the Blackwood estate began to change in ways no renovation ever could. The house no longer felt like a place people passed through. It felt lived in. Ethan Blackwood still woke early, still carried responsibility on his shoulders, still made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But something fundamental had shifted. He no longer avoided the kitchen. Mornings often found him there, coffee in hand, sitting at the small table that had once seemed insignificant. Maya moved through the space with ease now, not as someone trying to disappear, but as someone who belonged. They did not rush conversations. They did not force meaning into every moment. They simply shared space. And that, Ethan learned, was enough. Maya's mother began receiving consistent care. The constant tension Maya carried slowly softened, replaced by cautious relief. She smiled more easily, laughed more often, not because her life was suddenly perfect, but because she no longer felt alone carrying it. One evening, months after Christmas, Ethan found himself setting the table in the larger dining room. Not for 12, for 3. Maya noticed and paused. "You are using this room now," she said gently. "I am learning," Ethan replied. That night they shared a meal together again. Simple food, quiet conversation, no expectations. As they sat there, Ethan realized something he had never fully understood before. Wealth could provide comfort, security, and options, but it could not replace presence. It could not heal loneliness, and it could not create home. Home was built slowly, with patience, with consistency, with people who chose to stay. Later that evening, as they stood by the window watching the sunset stretch across the grounds, Ethan spoke softly. "I used to think I had failed at life because I lost so much along the way," he said, "but now I see that I was not finished yet." Maya smiled. "Most people are not." He looked at her, gratitude clear in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, "for inviting me to dinner that night." She met his gaze, steady and warm. "Thank you for saying yes." The house lights flickered on as darkness settled outside, glowing gently against the glass. Inside there was no emptiness to push away, only quiet, only warmth, only the understanding that healing did not arrive in dramatic moments but in ordinary ones that were finally allowed to matter. That Christmas, a lonely billionaire learned something no amount of success had ever taught him. That home is not defined by walls or wealth. It is defined by who sits at the table, and sometimes all it takes to change a life is one invitation and the courage to accept it.